6 things that I think make a great sample. And if you can be a master of these 6 characteristics of great samples, you can be a master of sample making. What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is SIKKY. I'm a producer from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Hope you're doing great wherever you're watching this from. In my last video, if you remember, I was telling you guys about this studio rack that I was building. That's what she looks like.
Ooh, Sicky.
Now that she's all done, got my cassette machine set up on there, all my equipment set up. If you're wondering how I, someone with absolutely zero building handyman skills, made this, well, let me tell you, I didn't. Not really. My girlfriend's dad and I basically built this over a weekend. Took us surprisingly a lot longer to put 4 sides of a plank of wood together, but can't lie, it looks pretty good. And you know what looks even better? The epic B-roll of me and my girlfriend's dad making this. Check it out. I really couldn't have done it without my girlfriend's dad's help. He's pretty skilled when it comes to this kind of stuff. He helped me make this. And if you guys are interested in learning how to make this yourself, I actually have a video that I was following when I was building this, and it's super straightforward. It'll be linked in the description. This thing is super sturdy. I think it costed just under 200 Canadian dollars to build. And the one that I was looking at purchasing was around $800. I think this actually looks better just because it matches the acoustic panels that I have already in my room. And the studio continues to stay in a state of chaos. So we'll just ignore that. We're working on it. A lot of new stuff to be brought into the studio. But in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about placements. Earlier this year when I decided, hey, I'm going to try this out and see what can happen. If I'm going to do this, I need to understand what exactly makes a great sample. And the way to understand what makes a great sample is to study people who already make great samples. And some names that come to mind of sample makers that I like are Eli Brown, amazing, done music with Kingsway Music Library, owns one of the most popular Arturia banks, the Loophole Bank. And then we have Coop the Truth, who's also released incredible packs. And some of his one-shots are probably some of the best one-shots that exist in Point Blank. Nami is another fantastic, phenomenal producer. And Shakati, who is a producer under Timbaland. As you know, I'm a huge fan of Timbaland and his productions, and he's a big inspiration for me. So after listening to all of their samples, I was able to come up with a list of 6 things that I think make a great sample. And if you can be a master of these 6 characteristics of great samples, you can be a master of sample making. And this is just how I've managed to explain it to myself. Before we get into explaining all those steps, make sure you hit the subscribe button, turn on those post notifications, because in the next couple of videos, I'm going to drop a free one-shot library of some sounds from a old piano that I have, an old children's piano. Can't wait to share this with you guys, but if you guys want to see that, turn on those post notifications, because the sample pack will only be available for about 2 hours during the posting of that video. Then it'll be gone. If you guys are into that, subscribe and turn on those post notifications so that you can quickly get that pack before it disappears. Now, let me tell you guys about the 6 masters of sample making. Okay, so the very first example that I have here is to become the master of silence. And as producers, we make music on the canvas of silence, quite literally. The famous composer Mozart once said, silence is the greatest effect in music. And since we make music on a canvas of silence, it's important to incorporate that in there. To become a master of silence is simply just to incorporate a little bit of silence. It doesn't have to be large gaps. It can just be brief moments. I've got some examples pulled up on my computer that I want to show you guys of what that sounds like. That's an example of a lot of silence from one of my own samples. Here's another example from Coop the Truth and Nami, and you can see that in their samples, they're incorporating very brief moments of silence. Check this out. Another example from them uses the exact same principle. Check it out. just a little bit of silence. Now, one way to do this is to convert your MIDI into audio and then create cuts and then just trim back one of the corners, just like so. Remember to add in a little audio fade, just like so. There you go. You have a little micro fade. Another way that I like doing this is with a third-party plugin like LFO Tool. This is kind of a preset that I've made for myself, and I just simply play around with the rate, half note, bar, quarter note, give you kind of a similar effect. The best part of incorporating silence into your samples is that it can inadvertently create bounce, which brings us to the next element of great samples, bounce. So what is bounce? Bounce is when you have some sort of rhythm within your sample, whether it be done through silence or whether it's done with percussive elements within your music, or whether it's done by adding in melodic rhythmic elements. For example, bells, if you play them in a certain way, where you place those notes will create a certain bounce. The real masters of this, Timbaland, for example, or SIKKY, will incorporate these rhythmic elements, but they'll place these elements in their samples in a way so that when drums are added, it actually makes the drum sound that much better because they're playing off of each other. They're kind of bouncing ideas off of one another. It's a real harmony of music and drums. And they'll place them in a way so that when someone adds drums to that sample, the drums actually sound that much better because the melody is filling in pockets where the drums aren't hitting. It's thinking about what the producer that you're sending the sample to is going to do with it. And if you do a really great job of creating bounce within your melodies, you'd be surprised at how little is needed to create a great song. I've even heard Timbaland add 2 drum hits, 1 kick, 1 snare in a 2-bar segment, kick, snare, kick, snare, and the melody had so much bounce that it sounded incredible. Here are some examples of samples that incorporate bounce.
Silly woo! Sample. Tempo. See what I'm saying?
Here are some examples of samples that incorporate bounce. Geez, what a great sample. Perfect for us to start talking about the next element that makes for great samples, melody. Great melodies. I mean, who doesn't like a great melody? Examples that come to mind, Carly Rae Jepsen's Call Me Maybe, Drake's God's Plan. The reason why those melodies are great and what makes for great melodies is repetition and simplicity. If they're not simple, they're repetitive. If you pay really close attention, you can hear repetition and the simplicity of them. Here are some examples of melodies that incorporate both simplicity and repetitiveness. It's rhythmically complex, but melodically it's very simple. Here's another example. Wow. Forget all the sonics of like, it's very simple. It's just chords but with a lot of little bits of fragments, but the chord progression is actually what's repeating. And that's what makes it so cool. There's so much space within that melody. When melodies are a little repetitive, they kind of start sinking into the background. They almost become a bed of music for the artist. And so when you pick those melodies, it's a lot easier for the artist to hear themselves because the repetition just becomes a canvas on which they're writing their top line, their lead line. Here's another great example. Na 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 na. That's all it is. It's just simple. And if you can create that bed of music, the melody is just simple. That's all you need to do. Now, if you like these 3 melodies, you'll be happy to know all 3 of them and a bunch more are included in Cymatic's brand new beta pack called Destiny. It'll be linked in the description, free to download, or they are all royalty free. So check it out and get cooking. The next element that makes for great samples is nostalgia. Over the years, music evolves, music changes, and we sometimes like to listen to some older music because it reminds us of a simpler time. It reminds us of the quote-unquote good old days. Now imagine if I could take that music that you are familiar with, that you associate with simpler times, and you combine that with newer sounds. Incorporating nostalgic elements in your music or your samples, I feel like adds that emotion that people kind of look for, even though it might still be kind of fresh. I've got an example here pulled up from my friend Eli Brown. He sent this over to me last minute. Shout out to him. Thank you so much, Eli. And just one more for good measure. This one's from Cymatics. Check this out from their Destiny pack. When it comes to making samples that are nostalgic, it isn't just let me put on RC20 and that's, you know, the sound. In order to be a master of nostalgia, you got to incorporate sounds that are traditionally associated with nostalgia. So for example, it could be the vibraphone or the pianette, some trumpets and trombones, a horn section, or a clean guitar run through a Fender Twin amp. Just there, knowing what instruments are used and how they're processed, there's just layers to that nostalgia, and you can obviously go very, very deep with that. Secondly, is to incorporate the music theory, the harmonies that make up that music. Of course, we can't forget about the arrangement of the samples or the mixing of the samples, but those elements, those sound selection and the harmonies used and the processing of the sounds, understanding and studying and even just reading up about how the Beatles, say, recorded their album, understanding how Eric Clapton or B.B. King, you know, recorded, how they played the guitar or how they drove their guitar signal into their amp. What kind of guitar did they use? Hollow body versus closed body? Would they have like humbucker pickers? Or not to get super detailed, of course, because it is a very deep, all of these are very deep topics. In order to be a master sample maker, being a master of nostalgia is one of those categories. Moving on next, the second last category, which is texture. What is texture? How do you use it? When do you use it? What's a good example of texture? The next element of great samples is texture, ear candy, and sonics. Now, the reason why I kind of have all three of those in one category is because they kind of all serve the same purpose. It's just a little bit of this, the thing that we do. It's just a little bit of this graininess to the sound. It's just a little bit of specialness that tickles our little ear hairs, if you will. How this is accomplished is in a couple of different ways. And again, you don't have to use all these ways. It's just incorporating one of these ways One is using noise of some kind, whether that's tape noise, cassette noise, environmental noise of like children on a playground, or a bar where people are talking, you know, just background noise that's happening. Great if you're doing R&B. Number two is to incorporate some kind of percussion drum element. Maybe that's a, I don't know, a cup sitting down, or a cassette plopped in, you know, like that kind of sound, whatever that might be, or even just a drum loop. Then you have what I love doing, which is little micro glitches, little twinkling sounds that are playing in the left ear, or contrasting elements in music, whether that be like a buzzy, noisy bass guitar that's doing a call and response with another element that's super smooth. So you have this psh sound, then comes in this soft, smooth sound. If none of that made sense, let me show you a couple of examples so that you know what I'm talking about. I don't know if you heard all that. I heard background noises, little bar conversations happening in the background, percussion elements, and then just enough of little glitchy, high-pitched voices, but that are tucked in real nice and quiet. We got another one here from Cymatics. Let's check this one out. You got a noisy bass, and then you have some percussion in there, and then the smooth vocal. Contrast. Let's listen to just one more for good measure. Little micro moments that are not completely separate, but that kind of create like that percussion sine wave hit. Then you have little reverse elements that are happening. All of it is just little ear candy. It doesn't need to be everywhere, because if it's everywhere, it's not special. You gotta have it just maybe like 2% of the time. Which finally brings us to the sixth and final element of great samples. This is probably the simplest and probably also the hardest. And the last and final element is to become the master of enough. When to stop, when to say, hey, I need to add one more element, or I need to take away one element, when to keep certain frequencies in there and when to take them away. When you only need to have one element playing, one melody, one piano playing, and when to add in just that one little vocal one shot and pulls it together, you know? All of these 6 elements, or infinity stones, as I would call them, of great samples put together. The master of silence, the master of bounce, the master of melody, the master of nostalgia, the master of texture, and finally the master of enough, which is the master of enough goes with everything. How much silence is enough? How much bounce is enough? How much texture is enough? And all of these things, we're like chefs. We're sprinkling a little bit of all these different spices onto our music, and easy to get carried away. But a true master, again, there's probably hundreds and hundreds of songs that are just very simple. Adele, Hello, piano, great song. Am I right? If you guys found this video helpful, inspirational, or exciting, or anything that made you feel good things, make sure to smash that thumbs up. Give me a subscribe, turn on those post notifications. Let me know which one of these elements you think you are a master of and which ones you think you need to work on. And I will pick a random person to win a free copy of my Pandora experience in the next 24 hours. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. That's it for me. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.